Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to IPDay's Webinar Wednesdays. I'm June Rawl, and I'm so happy that you're able to join us today for this special webinar titled Strategies for Integrating Compass 100 Requirements into Everyday Academic Lessons for Corrections. This is part one of a part two series. Part two, you may want to note, which will happen on March 13th. I just wanted to say that we were so happy to partner with the DOC to offer you this webinar today and really congratulate all of you for all your services. We realize that you work under unique conditions and, while you teach in those correction facilities. So again, we just want to thank the DOC for bringing this to all of us. So I'll go now to the housekeeping slide. Most of you have participated in webinars with us. So I just want to let you know, here is Mr. Alan Richardson. I forgot to introduce our famous facilitator for today. Alan Richardson, who is no stranger to all of you, is from the Department of Corrections in the central office. He is, as you know, responsible for a lot of responsibility, but is really your curriculum developer for the Department of Education. I apologize for that, Mr. Richardson. Thank you so much for facilitating our webinar for us today. So now we can go on to the housekeeping slide, and I just want to remind you that your microphones are muted. You are in a listen-only mode, but that doesn't mean that we don't want to hear from you. So you will be able to ask questions, and we hope you do ask a lot of questions. In order to do that, you would put those questions into the Q&A option on your screen. I will remind you that this webinar, like all IPDay webinars, are recorded and they are archived on the IPDay website. So with all that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Richardson, who's going to walk you through this wonderful webinar today. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. Today, I wanted to talk to you a bit about how to integrate Compass 100 objectives into your academic courses. In the workbook that accompanies this PowerPoint, I have provided you with some samples of how we'll do this, but we're going to go through and talk about the ins and outs of how you can attempt to do this, what's scalable, and what can be amended to fit your particular needs. Things to consider, resources that you can look for, etc. First, we want to talk about how to make connections. Most of you know the Compass 100 requirements exist in our academic setting to meet the career and college readiness portions of the DOE frameworks by which we in the Department of Corrections are bound to follow for our adult basic education and GED students, as well as our career and technical education students. One of the things that I hear a lot of people tell me they struggle with is, well, how do I make that fit with what I have to do anyway? So some things you want to consider when you think about how to make these connections. First one, get yourself a copy of the Traveler's Map. Put it down next to you and go through when you start to think about how can I make this fit. That Traveler's Map tells you everything, at least in abbreviated form, that you need to know to start to make the connections within the academic work and to fit the curriculum frameworks. The other thing that you'll want is a copy of our standardized academic education plans. For all of you who are teaching open population for the department, you should have these. And the reason you'll want to refer to them is because we've already done two parts of this task for you. We've connected the DOE frameworks directly to the standardized academic curriculum. So you don't have to worry about, does this lesson fit with this particular thing from the frameworks? We figured that all out for you. All you have to do is then look and see, can I make this work with the compass requirements on the traveler's map? So something to consider once you have all of that in your head. Often what we need for our inmates is something that is relatable. So start with the basic needs: food, clothing, shelter, even transportation. Whether they get out today, tomorrow, or 20 years from now, I guarantee you every inmate in your class is worried about food. If they're not worried about what they're serving in the chow hall today, they're worried about what they're going to get from the canteen when their order is coming in. All of these things to do with eating. Use it. There are options within food for talking about budget, nutrition, planning, all things that are in the traveler's map and part of the compass requirements. So you've got your DOE frameworks because you've got your academic education plans, and you have two options to work from. You can work from what's relevant to an inmate right now, things like the canteen. You can also work from things that will be relevant to the inmate in the future, like buying food on the street or housing on the street. What are the costs associated with that? What are the costs associated with clothing? Where do you get it? Etc. You don't have to hit all of these things simultaneously. Pick one and work up a plan for how you're going to get it into your academic lessons. Well, one way we can do this, since I am a math person, as most of you know, I worked on this from a math perspective. The example that I made for you covers the budget, and I worked on this from the academic level in terms of percents. What percent of your income are you going to spend? How are you going to plan it out? So I created this example for you, and in it I have connected it to at least one ABE standard and a GED standard from the curriculum frameworks. In doing so, that tells me exactly which books and which pages from the standardized curriculum this fits. And because we're going to do it from a budget slant, if I have the students answer some specific questions and connect it all up with the budget worksheet, which is also available in the public folders, then I can meet that compass requirement simultaneously. So we're working on food, one of our basic needs. Throw it out to your students. In my example, I have the scenario. You receive $5 a week from your family to spend at the canteen. You are able to get to the canteen once a week. When I've given this example at some of the sites, they say, but $5 isn't going to go very far. Okay, that's fine. That's an example of where the template that I've given you is scalable. You don't like $5? Mark it up to 7. Mark it up to 10, whatever is going to make sense in your situation. I would also point out, though, leaving it at 5 is a good choice, because one of the things we're supposed to convey here is how to plan, that you don't have an unlimited supply of money to get just whatever you want. You have to make your dollars stretch, which is going to be the very real situation for many of our exiting offenders. So there is value in keeping the total dollar amount small. It also limits the number of choices, which, let's face it, for many of our guys, having fewer choices to make is an easier first step than having the choice of everything. So Again, feel free to adjust, but keep in mind that there are reasons to keep it the way that it is. So, we want to answer the questions along with this. How will you spend your money so that you have at least one snack per day? Well, that's a 7-day week. If I can get to the canteen every day, or once every week, excuse me, means I have to plan for less than $1 worth of material every day. Again, that comes back to my planning. How will I know? Well, one of the things that you'll need for this exercise is a canteen menu. This is available on the DC web in the companion workbook. I have provided you the link that should take you to the canteen menu, or menus, I should say, as they are different depending on if you're at a male or a female facility, restrictive housing or not. They do have varieties. Please use the one that's appropriate for your situation. And go through. How will you spend your money? If you want to limit it to snacks, there is a snack section on the canteen menu. You can have them pick from just that portion. If you want to let them go for anything on there, you can do that too. Again, you're in control of this lesson as the teacher, but by doing this, we're connecting it back in to the notion of percentages. So you move down. You can ask the question for your lower level students, what is your monthly income? Again, that's a simple arithmetic problem, but it still connects it mathematically back to a lesson from the standardized curriculum and a standard in the DOE frameworks, both of which are important when you're doing this. Next question I have says, what percentage of your income are you spending on each item? If I buy 7 items so that I have one for each day, am I spending the same portion on each one? Well, that's a standard percent problem. What percent of X is Y? If you've done any math in the correction setting, I guarantee you've done questions like what percent of 35 is 15 from the fractions, decimals, and percents books. This is directly applicable to those math lessons. If you spend 30% of your weekly income on candy, what can you afford to buy? So now we've taken and we've done it a step further. We're not going to spend all $5 at the canteen. I want to save some back. Maybe I'm saving up for a tablet or an MP4 player or whatever it is they're getting music on besides the tablets now, or some other higher value, higher dollar luxury, quote unquote. So now we're talking about, we've moved a little step further, we're talking about financial planning. This is getting closer to the pathways to talking about budget. For your GED level students, add tax. For your ABE level students, we'll ignore tax. We're going to buy, and you look at the list, and we just need however many things that will add up to $5 total. That's fine for them. For the GED level students, you let them add in a few that have tax because they have to remember that comes out of your total. That's extra money that you have to plan into your budget that does not go directly towards an item. So again, that's the next level. That's a higher order problem that you're having them work on. If you do this, if you save back, say, $1 each week, will you still have enough money in order to have one snack a day? You've moved it up now to a limiting factor. Can you afford to save however much amount? Again, all of these values you can adjust to suit you. Change them 3-4 times using exactly the same questions so that you get some variety within the answers, yet still keep the feel and the flow and the overall impact of the problem. One of my favorite questions on this, especially in a correction situation, because we often forget this as those who are not the incarcerated. What factors may affect your selection other than the availability of an item? Ask this, if you do this in a small group session, you give this lesson. You ask this to the group and have them throw back things. The one that should come up immediately is just plain storage space. Inmates do not have an unlimited amount of storage space. So that's a consideration they may have inside that they wouldn't have outside. Physical location to put this. Often the dorms are not air conditioned. Are you going to buy 5 Snickers bars in the middle of summer if they might melt? Will that bother you? Again, that's a consideration you have to make as the purchaser. So all of these things you can have them do, and it all comes back into meeting the compass requirement. Because what is the compass requirement for budget? That they think of, plan, and put on paper something that will help them to see where their money goes, how it can be best spent, what they can control. For those of you who want to make this a little more realistic, guys who are fixing to get out, I have heard many places say, well, they bring in sale flyers from grocery stores and use the prices there to talk about budget. Excellent. Source your data that way. But don't be afraid also to use things like the Canteen Menu that are a little closer to right now, especially for those guys in your classes who have 15 and 20 years to go, or the lifers. It's still a skill that they need and want to think about. So with that in mind, what other standards can I possibly connect to this? Some of you out there are more inclined towards the language standards than I am. You may have some ideas of how you can connect this to a language standard. One that jumped out at me when I was looking recently. Some of you probably know, I did not, one of the speaking and listening standards. Now we're traveling over into that English stuff. Can be met if, during a group discussion, all participants participate according to the established rules of the discussion. Did you know that? So if you do this very math-slanted lesson, ask for student input, and everybody participates and is polite to each other while they give their feedback, you have met that speaking and listening standard on your academic education plan also. In this way, you can do something that will work for your very low literacy guys, in addition to hitting some math standards and getting the compass requirement out of the way. So don't be afraid when you're going through the traveler's map and you're looking at those AEPs and you're grabbing things from here, there, and all over the place. Do not be afraid to pick things that don't sound like they might go together. You may find something on that list that will fit if you just slant it a little more towards the applied side. If you do a group discussion, all participants do not have to be at the same level. Like I said, you may have some GED guys and some literacy guys who can sit in that group together and both have equally good ideas about how they're going to cram their locker so that they can get 6 bags of potato chips and not crush any of them, if that's their thing. So again, opportunity to mix groups that you might not be able to in other ways. And I jumped ahead where I intended to be. In the workbook, I've given you 2 sample lessons. The one on percents, which we talked about here. Then I covered exactly the same budget lesson, only I did it all in terms of fractions, because that's a similar lesson in a similar place. But again, that's an example of how you can take this template and adjust it just slightly, and now it's good for this lesson and whatever we're talking about today. Does that mean that you're going to do budget every time you talk about percents or fractions, that you'll do it twice with those same students? Of course not. But it gives you an example of how flexible you can be with when you try to slip this in. When would you do this lesson? Would it be at the beginning of talking about fractions or percents, or would it be towards the middle or end? I would recommend doing it more towards the middle or end, once we've had some basic of what is a percent, what is a decimal, what is a fraction. And then you can get into how to apply that and show how it connects to something that's relevant to what they're doing now. The fractions lesson, like I said, looks just like the percents lesson. In the template, I marked very clearly which standards were covered, what things from the academic education plan were covered, and which things from the traveler's map were covered. When you look at this, you may decide, okay, but I'm going to add this and I'll get this other thing from the standards done as well. That's fine. Feel free. What I want to encourage all of you to do is to take this information and create some of your own lessons. This is something you can bug, especially you ITA teachers out there. Bug your aides and your certified tutors about, because they will be able to help you find these connections, especially with the standardized curriculum books. They've been teaching out of this for 10, 12 months now, coming up to. Some of the books we were using long before the standardized curriculum, so they should be able to help you. What you want to do when they say, oh yes, I have the best idea for a lesson. You want to take that, have them write it up, and then put it into something that they bring and you sign off on. Do not let them teach any lesson and call it part of Compass that you have not, as a certified teacher, read through and checked off. Once you do and you're happy with it, let them teach it. Feel free to share with your friends and neighbors. I had a really great idea for doing a lesson this way. In fact, it would not surprise me if in the next 6 months or so, I don't solicit from everybody out there. Send in your lessons. Any lessons that you've done that you think are extra good. Any lessons that you think everybody else will be able to help and learn from. And we'll collect these up and get them out to everybody so that we all don't have to create all of this from scratch. That is the goal. As I said, while I have provided you with 2 examples, they are intended to be highly flexible for you to change up and do to fit your particular needs. For my friends teaching in restrictive housing, whom we have not standardized the curriculum for yet, your task is a little more daunting. because you need to actually take the curriculum that you have along with the standards and connect it then back to the Compass materials. We haven't done those first two steps for you. That doesn't mean it's impossible, but I promise you, they do have more difficult, or the more difficult task ahead of them. All right. I don't see any questions on my end popping up. So do tell Miss Rawl, how are we doing?
Yeah, we're doing great. Looks like one question, couple of questions just popped up when you said that. So check the Q&A.
Yes, ma'am. Doing so now. The Canteen menu is available on the DC web. When you look at the workbook, handbook for this particular webinar, the link is in there, but also it is on the procurement page, I believe, within the DC web. And I have a question about documents. I'm assuming that's again for the Canteen menu.
Should the inmate receive Compass 100 separate course or aligned with the CP program framework?
We are required. I have a question about CTE and the Compass program. And what we have to do, we, the Department of Corrections, we need to show, one, that we are following the DOE frameworks. There are frameworks for the academic education side, ABE, GED level students. There are also frameworks for the CTE side. Both of them require career and college readiness skills. If you have a student who has done one and then goes to the other, they do have to complete Compass requirements for both so that we can show that we are meeting the DOE standards should we be audited. So it is integrated in both cases, yes. The workbook, I believe, will be made available. Ms. Rawl, can you answer that about how they get the workbook?
The workbook and the PowerPoint is available now on the IPDAY website. So
Awesome.
go to the webinar, pick the webinar for today, and you'll see it there. Are you able to maybe later show them the workbook?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
So later in the presentation.
Well, okay. That I don't know if I can do because I don't have it exactly where I am.
Okay, no problem. They know where it is now that they can view it.
All right.
Yep, I think you got them all now, Mr. Richardson.
Or they're scared. Everybody tuned out half an hour ago. He didn't have anything important to tell us.
Mr. Phillips has provided the link to the canteen.
And some of these I will answer after I will have access to the questions and I will send you answers after the fact because they're beyond what I have time to be able to completely answer correctly at this point.
Answer it for somebody that's
Anybody else? I have a question about separate classes, and the short answer is our mandate is to try to get as much done in class as possible, and the more you have a separate feel, the more you will get pushback from the students about why am I doing this? How is this relevant to my life now, et cetera, especially for you guys that have a while to before they're going to leave. So the sneakier, yes, I said it, the sneakier you can be to slip it in an undetectable way and just make sure that you're documenting, the more time you will have to get rid of or get taken care of what most of us believe to be our primary goal, which is the math, reading, language in the academic classes. It doesn't hurt any of us to do a little more applied in the examples and the lessons, which is how we'll get the compass taken care of simultaneously.
if you're doing it separately, that's not successful as far as completing your GLE requirements. It might be successfully presented material, but you're not covering the requirements.
Yes, I have a suggestion that the food percentages example can also cover part of Module 5 in the health and wellness. Yes, it's an easy step to talk about how food values are associated with what they would pick for their budget and what are going to be your best choices as far as calories and sugars and these sorts of things. And once you have that discussion, now you're moving into wellness, which is a really big portion of Module 5. It also gives you the opportunity to potentially expand over into a science lesson to get those health and wellness and calorie topics. And if you have somebody who notes that say everything on the canteen menu is horrible for me, open it up to what would you pick if you were at the grocery store? What would be your good food values, your good nutritional choices in that situation? And that again ties it back. So yes, thank you for reminding me of that one.
Having nursing come when they do Module 5, which means they're not integrating it, but guest speakers are always welcome.
And yes, I see having staff from another department come to talk about some of the health topics. That's fine. You'll want to, again, integrate that a little more with your actual academic work so that we can get the dual values that we're after. But that is also not a bad idea to have an expert guest speaker come in.
same module is okay in class, but when they're scattered in different modules, it makes for a lot of different needs. You don't have to have everybody in the same plot.
Remember, I had a question about continuity, and I want to remind everybody that for the most part, when we're talking about meeting the Compass Live requirements, you can pick up pieces off the traveler's map anytime, any place. It is not a requirement in Compass Live that you start at the first thing on Module 1 on the traveler's map and work all the way through to the end without skipping around. Feel free to skip around. If what you're doing in today's lesson happens to be in Module 5 and what you do in one a week from now is in Module 1, that's okay. You are more than welcome to jump around, and I encourage you to do so that you can integrate these things as much as possible into what you're trying to accomplish anyway, which is get them GED ready. And a question about documenting to training. That will all be taken care of by the wonderful folks from IPDAY who have given us the opportunity to put this on.
And Mr. Richardson, that is all in their portal account. So when they go in their portal account and they look under the activity, they're going to see that they have attended this webinar. So that's where they will find it. If they have any problems, they can contact us directly.
Question about, are we required to use the worksheets? When Compass started, little over 2 years ago now, there were worksheets for Compass Live. No, you are not required to use those worksheets. We have been trying to get people to move off of those for some time now because they are somewhat intensive on the paper usage. That's why we're trying for a more and more integrated approach, because it also allows us to reduce our paper. As far as the readiness portfolio documents go, remember, we have full-size masters in the Compass folder on the that you get through in the public folders through your Outlook for all of the things that have to be turned in for the readiness portfolio. Those you can print, have the inmates write on. Once you do all of this stuff like I presented today about budget, have them fill in the blanks that are on that template, and it's ready to go in their readiness portfolio. As is. If you have a situation where you have type and print capabilities, not everybody does. Some have file transfer where they can then be printed, and you have been having your guys or ladies do some typing, especially on the things like the resume. Wonderful. You can use the template as a scratch sheet. Have them do their rough draft. Then let them go to the lab when there's time and sit in front of the computer and do the typing. The typing is a good skill, helps us meet the digital literacy requirements, which are also part of the curriculum frameworks. And getting their resume typed is a good thing in that area. So yes, by all means.
She might mean document the training that they do Compass as opposed to documenting this training. Maybe how do they document it on that what they've done on the traveler's map?
And I have a question that says classification document the Compass or clarification on document the Compass training. I am not sure what you mean. If you mean how we document what we've done today, which I believe we answered, or if your question is about how you document what the inmates have done while they're doing Compass. Question is, do we document what the inmates have done? Yes. Yes. And how do we do that is with the traveler's map. On the traveler's map, there is a spot for you to mark when you have completed a particular portion. If you did, for example, this lesson today and that I presented today, then on the traveler's map, you would have gone and found the section about budget. It's worth 2 hours, I believe. You would have put your initials next to it and they would have had credit for 2 hours. That 2 hours also needs to be put on their attendance sheet for Compass so that you're documenting the hours towards the 100 for completion that you turn into classification.
Can they see the questions?
No.
Oh, then you need to read out the screens.
Okay, that one, yes. I have something from the certification coordinator up here in central office. She would like me to remind everybody, once you have documentation of this training, you can scan and send it to Ms. Green for upload onto your teacher in service. And I believe that, correct me if I'm wrong, Ms. Rawl, that IPDAY also does a portion of that.
Yeah, we track it, but if they would like to send it to Suzanne Green, they just can, like she suggests, scan it and send it to her. Print the document, download it, send it to Miss Green. It's just proof that they did the webinar today.
Yes, ma'am. I have a couple of questions that I will answer individually offline because they're a little outside of the scope of what we're talking about today as far as actually making the Compass material part of your academic lessons, but I promise you we will get you some answers.
Only 15 minutes short.
Any other questions out there? We mentioned resources. This is where you go. Florida IPDAY.
And there's plenty of resources there for you that are specific for you, that for those of you that are serving in this capacity. So if you have any questions or you can't find something, you can always reach out to us.
Sent a copy of the certificate to Suzanne Green. Somebody asked about it service again. Sit. Thank you.
You have one more question that just came in.
Yes, ma'am. There is a checklist for live versus hybrid and the requirements for both. And again, if you will send me an email or I will answer that after this for exactly what that document looks like.
Well, it looks like you don't have any more open questions here, and you've done a fantastic job in answering them. And if questions do come out, send them to Mr. Richardson, and I'm sure he'll be happy to answer them or send them our way. But before we end today, did you have any final words, Mr. Richardson, before we go into the feedback?
Just want to thank everybody for attending today and giving me the opportunity to try and give some clarification and guidance on this topic. And by all means, tune in next month when either I or Ms. Schubarth, depending, will be giving some more examples of this, and especially slanting it a little more towards the English and reading standards.
Excellent. And next week's webinar is going to focus on strategies to use that you can use with your students to increase their ability to discern an author's tone and purpose in both fiction and nonfiction. So all things that are on the tape 11 and 12. So you won't want to miss that webinar either. It's next Wednesday, February 20th. Okay, well now you're going to see some feedback that will come on the screen. Go ahead and take a few minutes to answer those questions for us. We'd love to get your feedback. Again, if there are any unanswered questions, we will send the Q&A out to Mr. Richardson, and he'll be reaching out to you directly. So with that being said, I want to thank all of you for joining us today. I hope that you can join us again next Wednesday, and definitely be on the call for part 2 on March 13th. So enjoy the rest of your day, and thank you for participating.